Well, thank you all for joining us once again. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala, joined, as always, by our co-host, Jay Carter, also known as Timid. He's the hip-hop MC extraordinaire and the co-chair of BLM Tokyo. Good morning to you, Jay, out there in Japan.
Good evening to you there. It's a kind of an overcast morning here so far. I think we've been having some rain, so it's not going to.
I was going to ask you, is it cold there yet?
It's not super cold yet. It's still all right. Light jacket. I taught a qigong class out in the middle of the park a couple of days ago with the backdrop of the mountains, and that was early in the morning. It was fine.
Oh, there you go. We've got a very special guest with us here tonight, and it is nighttime in New York, but we're joined by Loycent Gordon, also known as Loy. He is the owner of Neir's Tavern, which is the oldest bar in New York. Is that correct?
100% correct.
Awesome. So we want to get into that, the history behind it, because it's such a rich history, and it really is, I would argue, a part of pop culture, and people don't know really all about it, and people should know more about it. I think the city of New York should do more to acknowledge it, but we'll get into all of that. But we'd like to start off with something on the lighter side. And Jay, I know you actually put me onto this. There was a live stream, I guess, a couple of nights ago that Tone Deaf and Pac FM were doing, along with Session and who was the fourth guy in that group? It was the EFAM, Substantial.
Substantial,
yeah, Substantial. And it was an anniversary of their album. And it's kind of similar to something that we did on YouTube, although we didn't do a live stream. But for the FAM album, we put together that little YouTube series. And it's always interesting to have a retrospective look at a project years later. In this case, it was 20 years later. Wow, time really flies. And they spoke on the making of all the songs, and just kind of where they are now and just how they feel looking back at all this kind of stuff. So I found that to be interesting. So thank you for putting me onto it. I was able to be one of the viewers to catch it live.
Yeah, and it's funny is I didn't even catch it. I caught the preview of it, but I didn't catch the actual show of it. So yeah, I'm glad that you got to check it out, because I know you knew more about QN5 and their works than I did.
Yeah,
we worked with some of those guys, and before, and they had really good music. So I'm glad.
Yeah, and Loy, there was some classic hip hop recorded right there in Woodhaven, right?
Yeah, matter of fact, the building that Neir's Tavern is housed is actually very, very musically historic. We're talking about Salt and Pepper. Their album was done there. Kid and Play. In fact, at one point I think it was the early 90s, it was about 50% of the top 10, hits on the Billboard charts. They were actually recorded in that building. And it's very, very historic. So when you talk about classic hip hop or in the 90s and things like that, you will definitely see a lot of stuff going back to that building. It's been one of those hidden secrets, just like Neir's Tavern has always been.
Right. Domingo used to bring in artists to do all of his work there. So we still actually work with Domingo and speak with him, and he'll tell you a lot about that history as well.
Yeah. What studios is in that building?
Yeah, it was called, studios called was Bayside Sound Recordings, and there was another name that they have. It was a bigger one, a smaller one, and then a private one. Artists really loved it. Even Eminem also visited there as well. Sean Paul on the reggae side. We had some more rock acts that also recorded there. It really is a very, very historic music-wise and entertainment.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that one Eminem song that Domingo produced was recorded at that spot in Woodhaven.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one it was.
I believe it was called Hustles and Hardcore, or Hustlers and Hardcore, or something of that sort.
Oh, really? Good. You know what? Maybe you should send me that, because a lot of times people ask me more about the music history, and I don't really know that deep into it. I just know some of the artists that recorded there, and I didn't know that which Eminem song and if it actually was released or not. But this was pre Dr. Dre, just before Dr. Dre. This is one of those unofficial, like they were getting ready to sign him.
So Eminem was down with a group called The Outsiders. If you know actually, if you follow Busta Rhymes and the Flip Mode Squad, Rod Digger is part of that group. She's also part of The Outsiders because her husband actually is Young Z, who's like a core member of The Outsiders. And so when Eminem came to New York, he would stay in New Jersey with them, and they would record in Brooklyn and Queens. So he would come to Woodhaven, and he would come around depending on who he was working with at the time. So a lot of those early recordings were done in New York by Eminem.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that deep. Wow. That's amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Mike knows the hip hop stuff.
People. Yeah, I mean, it seems like
here's a really interesting one also. So we mentioned the Domingo connection. Domingo did a lot of work with KRS-One, and I would like to find the exact album or song, but he told a story one time about how he brought KRS to record in Woodhaven. And don't forget, KRS had that beef with Queens, really. I mean, it was not all of Queens, but Queens kind of got dragged into it with the whole Bridges Over stuff. Yeah. So, the whole line, Queens keeps on faking it, right? That was the big part of it. So right. KRS actually told Domingo I think he went to like the supermarket around the block or something like that. And he said that people were kind of like grilling him there because the beef was still kind of on, or there's still hard feelings from that. And Domingo's like, hey, listen, you're in Queens. You're going to get some of that heat here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe that. That's actually, I mean, back then it was pretty dangerous because, people took their territorial, parts of that hip hop really seriously. And you got to be very, very careful if you come in someone else's turf and you disrespect. So I'm sure he was walking around pretty, very lightly and just zip, Yeah.
Oh, here we go. I actually just pulled up a post.
I put the link to the track on Spotify in the chat.
Okay. So Domingo put up a post. Let's see. This is from May of 2021. He said, when Eminem was brought to 78/88 Studios in Woodhaven, Queens, that's I guess what they were calling it, to be on his 13th Floor album. He said, when I looked at him wearing a plaid shirt and hair combed to the side, I was like, oh boy, who is this kid? I looked at my man, twisted my lip like whatever. But then when he got in the booth and started rapping, it was a different story. Then a few weeks later, his debut album came out and he was out of here. Right. So this is actually apparently when he brought Eminem to Woodhaven for his own project. It was, according to the way he tells it, just a few weeks before that first album. But I don't know if that's Infinite or the Slim Shady EP or the LP with Dre. He didn't clarify in this particular post.
Right. I know that it was just before, apparently, again, I wasn't really that close to the actual recording and stuff. I was still kind of around, but I wasn't that deep into it. But I do know that, he was there, and it was just before Dr. Dre officially signed him and then brought him to California. Yeah. And, everything after that went like multi-platinum, it was amazing. But it seems like you definitely know more of the origin story and the connection with all of these really classic guys that end up becoming so popular that came here in Woodhaven and recorded and did some amazing work that brought them to become millionaires now.
Yeah, no, pretty incredible. And, for those who don't know, I was signed to Rawkus Records. So some of that early M stuff came out on Rawkus, like he had a song called Any Man on Rawkus. And even on the song Stan, he mentions Rawkus, right? Stan says, I like what you did with Rawkus. That was fat. It's one of the lyrics on Stan. So we're still connected to some of these guys. And I always find it interesting that a lot of that early history on, these guys' careers, which went on to become hip hop history, and I would argue American history, happened in Woodhaven.
Yeah. And I don't think you don't really get, Woodhaven's name pop up in any kind of hip hop conversation. So it's very interesting that, there was a studio there that had such types of work recorded there.
Yeah. Right. I know that one of the things that they loved about Woodhaven and this studio specifically was that it was really hidden. So when you have, people that are already celebrities in their own right want to record and just kind of get that sense of peace and just to record without walking outside and getting mobbed, that was the spot. And so a lot of those recording artists, they loved it. If you look at a lot of studios, a lot of them, you don't even know that they're studios. You know, they're just really just kind of buried, unassuming. You know, just like the breweries nowadays. You know, a lot of them they were tucked away, but that was the mystique. And that was the thing that a lot of celebrities loved about it because it was hidden. And Woodhaven was one of those places, like Jay talked about. It's like I would never think that all these popular artists are recorded in Woodhaven. But yeah, that was the whole idea of it. We let's focus and do our work and get the job done. And they released, Salt and Pepper, and I mean, amazing. Grandmaster Flash, so many acts that recorded there.
That's what's up.
So I want to get more into the history of Neir's in a minute, but just to finish the thought on the Tone and Pack EFAM live stream, they mentioned an artist named Megaran in that live stream, and it brought me back because I was asked to be on the first album he put out as Megaran. And back then it was a rapper named Random who had this Megaran concept at the time, which was he was going to take music from the Mega Man video games and rap over it and create a whole project based on that. He called so from Random as the name of the rapper, he took that to Mega Ran instead of Mega Man. And at the time I was on Raucous, and I believe, trying to get the timeline right, I believe I was on Raucous already when he asked me to be on it. But this is like in the MySpace days, going back to 2005, 2006, 2007. And so he hit me up saying, "Hey, I'm a big fan. I'd love for you to be on this project." And so I did a verse, and I didn't really know much about Mega Man, the video game. Like as a kid, I played it a little bit, but I didn't really know much about like the lore behind it and like all the stories and the characters and all that kind of thing. So I did some research. I remember like just going on Wikipedia and reading the names of the bosses and things like that. And I wrote a verse based on that and had some wordplay in there, and I sent it to him. And it came out, and little did I know that would become like this cult classic in, I guess, the video game world. I guess you see it like at Comic-Con a lot now. And he really launched a whole career as Megaran. He kind of abandoned the whole Random thing and just really dove into this Megaran persona. And you see him now doing like video game conventions. I think even Capcom has hired him to do music soundtracks for their games. Like it really became his deal. And looking back on that, I was fortunate. I didn't know what it was going to become, but it became a pretty big thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I remember that at the time that you were getting involved with that. You were telling me about it. So yeah, that's pretty dope.
So check it out. We can put the link also in the chat as well to that one song. It's called the Robot City Remix, and I'm on there. You had a bunch of different rappers on there, and they're all kind of dropping Mega Man references in the lyrics. What I tried to do is I tried to take bosses in the game at the time and relate them to current hip hop lore or stories or characters in hip hop, like those. I think the Fireman. I think Lil Wayne was calling himself the Fireman at the time, and there was the Iceman, which was I think Paul Wall was calling himself the Iceman. But these were also Mega Man bosses. So I kind of used that opportunity to kind of tie that together into the state of hip hop. But anyway.
So it was Robot City Remix.
Robot City Remix. We'll put that in the chat for those who want to check it out. Yeah. And I didn't know how big it was going to become amongst those circles, because I'm not really in those circles. Jay, you might be more tied to them than I am. Like, because I know you're into like the Marvel stuff and the superhero type stuff. I think there's some overlap there. And like probably if you go to Comic-Con, a lot of people are up on that.
Yeah, I don't know those circles. This is more the video game stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I know there was some success with that album. So yeah, no, that's really dope. I didn't know that he went on and kind of made a career out of it afterwards. That's cool. Yeah.
And actually, he was at a show that we did. I think he was still Random, but the Mega Ran stuff had just come out. I don't know if you recall this, but I think it might have been at Blackguards in Manhattan. We were performing as the Fam, and he was there as Random, I think, doing the set as well. Because I remember announcing during our set that I was on his album.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, if anyone out there listening, do you know who Mega Ran is? Have you ever heard Mega Ran? Are you into that? Because I think he did several projects under that name.
James in the chat said he said he knew he heard the name before. It sounded familiar.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll put that in the chat. So here we go. Jeremy in the chat says, did President George Washington go to Neir's?
No, as far as I know, but Grover Cleveland did. So he was the only, was it two-term president that served two non-consecutive terms?
Yeah.
So the lawyer, if you go to nearstavern.com and looked up our little 8-episode podcast, there was a gentleman that I talked to, and he talked about the history of Grover Cleveland coming to Neir's Tavern, because it was a political spot, a place where politicians would come into the campaign and to strategy. So not exactly, George Washington, but Grover Cleveland was a visitor of Neir's Tavern.
Okay. So then when exactly did it start? When did it open?
Neir. So when it opened, it wasn't called Neir's Tavern. In fact, it was called the Old Blue Pump Room, because outside, which if you look to this day, outside there was a water pump. And so I guess they kind of named the place somewhat close to it, the Old Blue Pump Room. And if you look right now, right outside, in almost the exact same spot, you would see a DEP water testing station. And it's really interesting that you have that and you have the hydrant right next to it, considering that over 193 years ago, you had this water pump there, and this remnants is still there after 193 years, linking the two. Well, most people don't really know that.
So what year was that?
The name started. That was in October 1829. And the story really is that one of the most famous racetrack in the 1800s opened right in front of Neir's Tavern, and it was called the Union Course Racetrack. And so a businessman decided to open a bar right across the street from the entrance because the crowds were so enormous. They said the city of New York was empty. There were so many people that would come to see a northern horse and the champion southern horse come right there to race right in front of where Neir's Tavern is in this course. And so, listen, if you have a lot of people, there is commerce, right? And Neir's Tavern was open October 1829 because of that.
1829. That's incredible. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then I guess later on, Mae West got her start there, right?
Yeah, I mean the place has an incredible history, definitely entertainment history, even like Civil War history. Even back in the Civil War, right across the street was a Civil War encampment for the soldiers before they get shipped down south. And yeah, definitely turn of the century, there was a Mae West connection. In fact, she had a house a few blocks away from Neir's Tavern.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guests, great grandparents and stuff would talk about Mae West as a little child running around Woodhaven.
We had a huge outside her house, right? I've been to the house before.
Yeah, there's a plaque there that's just signifying that. I was talking to the guy that lives there, and he's like, yeah, every year there's people that come on her birthday and take pictures. So he's kind of used to it now.
Yeah. And then, of course, you had Goodfellas. You had some famous scenes from that movie filmed there as well.
Yeah, 14% of the Goodfellas movie was filmed at Neir's Tavern. Most people don't even realize how much was actually filmed there. But Martin Scorsese loved Neir's Tavern, the building, and just the whole mystique of it, and that he decided to film that many. One of the famous scenes that you might know was the mink coat scene, and you had the pink Cadillac. After the big heist, everybody got all this money, so they started spending it. And then they started coming into the bar to celebrate. During the Christmas time, you have Frosty, the Snowman, all that in the background. Everybody's celebrating until Robin Deere realized, that all these people, this stuff, and bringing so much light on us, like what's going on when they're supposed to be laying low. Yeah. So that's when he just got this, one of the guy, I forget his name now, you probably remember. And he said, what did I tell you? Don't buy anything. Don't buy anything. What did I? He's like, it's Minko. It's my mother's name. And I love that scene because the way they dimmed down that music, that Frosty the Snowman, and then it just went dead silent. It was like, okay, this is a turn of events. This is something's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to did. Yeah,
You got the
eventually
famous scene with Robert De Niro, and you try to recreate it with the Neir's challenge, right? Like, oh, come here, that kind of thing. The
yeah,
arm.
yeah. Yeah, one of the fun scenes, is at the beginning of that scene where Robert De Niro was just greeting everybody like, come here, you. And so that still has been put up on Neir's Tavern Facebook page and so forth. And eventually people started imitating it. And so we call it the Neir's Goodfella Challenge. So if you search around, you'll see. And it's just wonderful because it really just, about the Neir spirit, like welcoming outsiders and you're part of the family. And that's what we really try to do. And so it's just perfect that it's just really actually ironic that a Goodfella, a gangster movie, we're using that to signify community, but it's just similar. It's like, the mob is, it's like family, you don't want to, you can't get out, but once you're in there, it's like family.
Now, Lloyd, I find that very interesting, and it sounds like it had a very significant role in the film. And I mess with Mike all the time, and he mentioned it earlier about not seeing many of the Marvel films or anything. I have not seen Goodfellas though, so I know he's going to have something to say about that.
Have you seen the Godfather films?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you gotta watch that.
You're not alone. I've met a few people that come in there, and that said, and I kept saying, I'm going to have to do an event and invite everyone that has not seen Goodfellas to come there, and we all watch it for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Now you've had screenings of Goodfellas there, right?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the last one we had was when Ray Liotta passed away earlier this year, and so many people came out. That was the only place, or one of the only places, that they felt that, if Ray Liotta passed, where I'm going to go, I have to figure out how to celebrate his life and what he meant to the film industry. So a lot of people came there, and it was like a 24-hour thing. And next thing you know, it was packed, and the news came, and they were recording it, and became this big to-do thing. So that's why I'm just really happy that so many people that have been regulars at Neir's Tavern come there, because if it wasn't for people that's going out their way to come to Neir's Tavern, we'll be closed, and people wouldn't have a place to, celebrate, these iconic films.
Now, there's a question. There's a question in the chat asking if that is where Chris from The Sopranos got shot in the foot. And so, by extension of that, I want to know, have there other productions been filmed there as well?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of films that was done there. But, there's been a handful of like big multi-million-dollar movies, obviously Goodfellas. But we had, was it Tower Heist?
Tower Heist. Ben Stiller and Eddie Murphy, was it?
Eddie Murphy. And there was a few other like big time A-listers, actors. So that was filmed there. They took over the place. And in fact, I didn't realize this, but the director loved Neir's, and he said, I wouldn't discredit Neir's Tavern by changing it to like Joe's Pub or something. I'm going to keep it just the way it is. And when I do a setting shot, I guess they call it, to set the scene, I'm going to keep Neir's in it. And that's how I went to the movie theaters. I'm sitting back and I'm like watching this thing. And I'm like, these movie people, they talk all this stuff. And next thing you know, I was like, holy crap. It said Neir's Tavern. The camera comes down and then it goes inside the door. I was like, holy crap. He actually kept it. Yeah. So if you go to Neir's Tavern now and watch that movie, you'll see exactly, outside of Neir's, exactly what's in the movie.
Yeah. I was just going to mention, as an aside, you mentioned Ray Liotta dying on the new Nas album on the song Michael and Quincy. He actually mentions the fact that Ray Liotta died. And he also mentions Adam Clayton Powell as a reference. I actually hit up Adam Clayton Powell, who was the fourth, I believe, the son of the congressman, who was on our show before. And I just mentioned that Nas mentions the name on his new album, and he had no idea. So he thanked me for that, for letting him know on that. He's, oh, that's great. Thanks for telling me. So
wow. Beautiful. Wow. That's powerful. That's awesome. Nas is so like consciously connected, man. Like he really is like just so consciously connected. And he's just so true. He's so true. Nas is, Illmatic and the albums. I remember, I was a DJ for a little while, and that's how I actually paid my way through college. We didn't have money. And so I was exposed to some of his music. And, you know, when you really listen, it's not just because I was doing more party music because I had to pay the bills, you know, and that's what the club wanted. But if you really listen to a lot of stuff, man, it's really next level and make you think and really consciously connected. So a lot of respect to Nas.
If you haven't,
and he's a Queens kid too.
That's right. He's a Queens kid. He's got another ode to Queens on his new project. And he actually mentioned Woodhaven in a song at least once that I can think of on DJ Clue's first album.
Get out of here.
I need to know, what was your DJ name?
DJ Flash Gordon.
Okay.
It works.
Yeah. DJ Flash. Well, you know,
what was the rationale behind choosing Flash Gordon for your DJ name?
Well, because my last name was Gordon, and you know, I know Grandmaster Flash, and so I was also a little old, you know, old soul in so many respects. So, you know, although it's flashy, I really catered to a lot of the party goers and things like that. That kind of helped, you know, me to, you know, fund my school. But I also wanted to find a way to kind of still stay grounded. So it just kind of worked, where on the surface, Flash Gordon seemed so very superficial, kind of like party, yeah. But for me personally, there's a deeper meaning, right? It's me being grounded back into the old school, the Grandmaster Flashes of the day, and like you said, Keras Ones and stuff like that, and just roots, you know, conscious stuff, and that's how it just kind of came all into, you know, Flash Gordon.
That's dope.
Okay. That's really dope. Now you're also an FDNY firefighter, right?
Yeah, I joined the FDNY right after 9/11 happened. I signed up to take the test, and a few years later, you know, I scored a very good score, where out of like 20-something thousand, I was 642. So I was in the first class, one of the first classes after 9/11 to go in to replenish the ranks, and so I've been serving, you know, FDNY in the city of New York as just another way to again, to stay, you know, on the surface. A lot of things might seem one way, but in my heart, I do a lot of things very purposefully, that keeps me back to the roots and meaning. And so that's one of the things that I signed up to do, because it also is a way to really stay grounded, that, you know, you got to serve. There's no price. You know, there's no amount of money someone's going to give me to really put my life on the line. So why else are you doing it? Well, I want to do it because I care, and because so many of the firefighters passed away. Maybe this is one way to help. So some people give food, some other people sign up.
Excellent. James in the chat says, I thought Francis Tavern was older. I thought that's where George Washington drank. I could be wrong though.
Yeah. So I love this conversation because I remember, I think it was the Huffington Post and a bunch of other people they hired all of this because the debate, who's the oldest. It's just been one of those things where it hasn't been cleared. So the Huffington Post, which is a, you know, well-respected organization, new organization, did all this research. They hired, like, you know, all these historians and everything. You unearth all the documents that they could find independently of the actual restaurant trying to push, you know, all this on the, you know, down their throat. And guess what they came up with? They couldn't really decide. But what they did decide is that Neir's Tavern is the oldest continuously operating bar in New York City, still located in the same location. Hasn't changed, hasn't burned down like Francis Tavern has, and they just kind of recreated, you know, 50 years later. That's
what I was going to say also. So you might be able to find something that started earlier, but is it still there now? That's really the test.
Right. So when I say oldest in New York City, we're talking about under that designation. You could come up with other ways, but that is just my interpretation of what oldest means. And so that's my take on that.
And say that for it's interesting is, you know, America's only as the United States is only, you know, 200 some odd years old. And so it's kind of rare to see a business that's been continuously running for almost 200 years, right? Now, out here in Japan, as I was talking with Mike earlier, that's very common. All of the majority of the most longest running businesses, continuously running businesses in the world are here in Japan. Like the oldest was a hot spring and hotel that started in the year 705. But in the United States, it's like very, it's very rare. So to be around that long is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's the root of, the problem, I think. Maybe some people might not think it's a problem, but there's something to be said about holding on to some sense of tradition. Certain things that, you can't just buy because, nothing that holds so much of our America's history should be bought because they want to put a high rise. There's got to be something that we say, you know what, this is worth more than any money. I mean, I if you really look at it, like, can America be bought? That's what we're saying. The more of them disappears, like, yeah, maybe America can be bought, And so Neir's Tavern and my mission has been, well, let's try not to have this one be bought and disappear, because I think we're also losing a part of our soul. Every time a historic one closes, we're losing a little piece of our soul. And that's a problem. That's one of my deep missions. I can't really do it myself. I'm doing a service and trying to help. But if you really look at it, more of them close, the more of America's soul disappears. And there's not many of them to even say, oh, this is just too gigantic of a problem. There are very few bars that's 193 years old in America. So there should really be a concerted effort to figure out how do we keep America's history going, living, breathing history.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, being that old, that means you were open. Neir's Tavern was open during Prohibition. So were they sliding with the secret speakeasy, sliding some drinks under the counter, or did they adhere to the laws?
Yeah, so there's always been this uncertainty and this unproven thing of, what was your proof that Neir's Tavern was open or any other place, matter of fact. So we've gotten a lot of clues. In fact, the latest one we got was by Ina Henderson, who is one of our Neir's Tavern 200 group members. We have a little Facebook group called Neir's 200. Basically, volunteers pushing for Neir's Tavern to reach the 200th anniversary in 2029. And she did some research. She found out recently that the owner at that time was arrested for selling booze out of Neir's Tavern. So there's a court record showing that, yeah, we were operating. In fact, this guy got arrested and for doing it, and for it was like years after, during Prohibition, like into Prohibition. And then another customer was telling me, old school guy was telling me about there's this gap between the ceiling of the first floor and the floor of the second floor, and where they used to do a lot of these distilling and these little storage and stuff like that. So every bar and restaurant that operated during that time have their own unique way that they operated. So that's a little bit of our story. And so, yeah, we were there doing it, man, providing a service.
So is there a secret room that, that needs a password or a knock to get into?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have that anymore. And the
place anymore. So there was one.
Yeah. If you look around, you'll see some very interesting place. Like, for example, one of the doors is it's closed off. You can't really you're like, what's behind there? I was like, I don't even know. I just know that it's sealed shut. And that's all I can tell you, my friend,
So for some historical perspective, 1829, Andrew Jackson is president of the U.S. Now, my question is to you, how did you get involved and when did you get involved?
All right.
Yeah, like you said, I was I was the guy that was, fighting fires and running to burning buildings, that crazy guy. But I've always felt the need, I came to this country from the island of Jamaica, so I wasn't born here. But I came here in a very bad situation, and I didn't have a lot. My parents didn't have a lot. Is the unfortunately recurring immigrant story of just coming here with nothing and just feel like, I need to figure out how to make things work for myself and to gain this opportunity that they said America is about. And so I worked very hard and was able to get a certain level of success, including joining the fire department and a few other things. And, I felt that, I've been afforded a lot back then. And I was like, what else can I do? And during my time of trying to DJ and doing, this whole thing with DJing and everything I've been involved with, the building was owned by a guy that had the recording studio. So we got over there, and I got over there to get know more about the recording business, and he told me that unfortunately they were 6 months behind rent, and he's getting ready to close the place, and then about a couple weeks go by, and he's like, yeah, I have this bodega owner, he's going to turn into a bodega. So I wasn't really there as a customer every day kind of a thing. And then I found out that it's going to be days from it closing, and that's when I said, this is historic. Someone's going to do something. Come on, after so long, 180 years at that time, someone's going to do something, right? And then I realized, like, wow, I guess that someone's got to be me. And so we created this crazy deal with the landlord, and basically it was like an offer that he couldn't refuse, right? Basically, he was a part owner. He's going to get all his rent paid. That was owed, plus current rent and all of these things. And we were able to do it. And so we end up saving Neir's Tavern. And it was a very interesting thing that happened. And it was an act of service and a passion project that I took on. And I would hope that more people would try to support small business. I don't say just own it. I'm a little crazy like that. That's a little way beyond. But you could do small things as well. You can make a conscious effort to say, all right, today it's going to be all small business. I'm going to shop local. I'm going to literally shop local. So that was my act of giving, and by jumping in and help.
That's you mentioned like small business and things like Neir's Tavern. To me, that's one of the strong points. I live in a country town out here in Japan, and there's a lot of small business or mom and pop shops, establishments, cafes, that type of thing. And so everything's got its own personality, its own flavor to it. And I think that's really an interesting thing. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when the first Starbucks finally came to this town, and it was kind of a bittersweet moment for me, because I'm thinking, there's all these great little cafes around here that are run by the owner or family, that we don't need a Starbucks out this way. But I think those types of things add character and value to a neighborhood.
Right. And so on that point, what can we do to preserve it? I know there has been an effort to have it designated landmark, right? Give it a landmark status with the city. And I know that's been a struggle. I wrote a letter years back advocating for that. But where are we with that, and what more can be done, or what else should we be looking to do to make sure that it doesn't go away?
I think the number one thing that a lot of the small historic mom and pops struggle with is owning the building. Neir's Tavern needs to own the building. This is a way to own our own destiny in so many ways. And then that building and the ownership should be a nonprofit, should be a foundation that owns that building. And so what we essentially have done now is turn a organization that is like, let's squeeze as much rent out as possible. Let's just squeeze as much out because I got to buy a brand new house somewhere, or the Mercedes or whatever, to a place to say, okay, what can we do as a community to make sure we maximize not profitability, but purpose and things that are more, culturally important. And that's what we maximize, and not profit, but a sense of purpose, because now we're purposefully saving a part of our soul by saving historic local business that's part of America's historic fabric.
Yeah.
Right. And how long have you held on to it? When did you become owner?
Yeah, so January, end of December, January, will be 14 years I've been involved with Neir's Tavern since I first got involved.
Wow.
It's been a little while of trying to do my little part.
Yeah.
How'd the pandemic affect you guys?
Terrible. Terrible. I mean, listen, we learned so quickly how little cash flow that a local bar and restaurant, a local business actually have, because we learned that the average bar and restaurant have approximately 1 to 2 weeks of cash flow if they had to shut down. Now, what was supposed to be a few weeks, kind of a pandemic thing, turned into months and then years. So if you look at some of the statistics, we have lost over 110,000 small independent restaurants throughout the United States because of that. So it was a challenge. We learned that the first 2 weeks, a lot of the money from the PPP was actually exhausted because a lot of big corporations just got so much of it because they were quick to act and they know how to do it. And so a lot of businesses with that 2 weeks cash flow runned out and everything is gone and money is gone. They closed, they disappeared. But I was grateful to have a lot of our guests, a lot of our supporters that don't just say shop local, but actually take action. There's a big difference. There's this rhetoric of shop local. I'm not a big, proponent of keep telling you shop local. You know what is right. You know in your heart what is right. And when it's time for you to do that, when you're shopping too much to the big brands, and when it's time to balance or recalibrate, you know that. We just have to live more in line with our values. And if you do that, you don't need a shop local. You don't need a government to spend $10 million trying to convince you to shop local. We're going about it the wrong way. We have to figure out how to get back to our purpose, our values. And so we can balance this seesaw that is fortunately tilted to one side.
Right. And the Woodhaven community, to its credit, is very supportive of Neir's and always does what it can to help out. And I'm always happy to see that. So many people rallying for Neir's and participating. I know you recently did an anniversary, you had a whole block party out there. Right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love when people say, it's very interesting because I started looking, so people kept saying so many times, like, people, the community loves Neir's and they support and it's very interesting because I'm started dissecting it and I look around and I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. But then I looked deeper and I was like, there's these core people. I could name a lot of them. The Richie Salmon of the world, the Ina Henderson of the world, the Nancy Aguila, Liam Castro, Kathleen Flood family, like so many, there's these people and they are the core. And then outside of that core, there's some casual customers, and outside those casual customers, there's some people that come once in a while. But they always say that they know Neir's. You walk down the street and they say, oh, Neir's, I know that place. But you're like, why isn't there a line down the street? Right. But it's because this is cores that keep coming in. The line down the street came when we were days from closing. And so the core was with me for a year trying to fight this situation. And then we found out that we're going to have to close. The core couldn't carry all that burden anymore, just like I couldn't carry it by myself. And what we end up having was this shock wave where it went from the core of people that was just there all along spreading the word, and those outside regular customers, they caught the wave. And then the outside people that know about Neir's, they caught the wave, and then it turned into this national news that I couldn't even believe. New York Times and so many other people jumped on, and even the mayor of New York City. So when we talk about community, I think we have to talk about the core, and those core is people that's in our Neir's 200 Facebook group, and of course my dear customer advisory board, the Neir's Tavern ambassadors that are with me every day. We talk and we try to figure out how do we steer Neir's to 200 years. And those people show up every day, and hopefully they don't have to be the only one to carry the burden of keeping America's soul alive. And we'd love to have more of you guys to be part of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And anything I can do to help, let me know. I'm always here, always available. So, you tell me how I can be useful, and I got your back. You mentioned casual.
I'm going to tell you the first thing that people should do.
Yeah.
Here's the first thing. It doesn't cost anything. It's nothing you can do. Now, social media is this whole big thing, Turn on your notification in Neir's Tavern. Turn on your notification to always. That's one thing. You put it to always, so you know when something happens, or even if you can't make it, you pass the word. Like, the problem is that a lot of this, we have 6,000 people, right, on this Facebook page, but, most people don't see it because they are still divided with where they're putting their attention in. So if Neir's Tavern is it's part of your core value, turn that notification on. You have to.
See, I'm on here right now. I don't even see how to turn that on Facebook.
Yeah,
it's on Instagram. I think you can do that.
You could do it on all of the platforms.
Right.
But the point is that there's different ways to not let the things that are important to you get lost among the things that are not important to you, right? And that's a constant fight because, there's a lot of money being spent to get our attention. And oftentimes it's things that's not with our values. But you know what? It's McDonald's is right there. So we got it.
There it is. So that's on Instagram.
Wow.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
One down.
That's right.
6,000 to go.
That's right. Let's do it. Let's have a whole campaign. Notifications on for Neir's.
And that's with that, with social media, I would imagine you could probably, do something there, especially being the oldest running bar in New York. There can be, potential for it being an influencer destination for people. Oh yeah, I've been here, and now I'm putting it up on my social media. TikTok would be a good spot right now as well, and doing whatever's good on that.
Jay, and I get a lot of that, and I understand the strategies and why it's important. And I don't want to say, Neir's is different because, when you look at everything, it really seems in reality, behind the mystique of Neir's Tavern, it's like any other business. We still have to fight for attention. We have to, tell people, come here for this day, come here for that day. And someone was saying to me, it was my assistant, Kim, and it's like, Lloyd, you're doing all of these things to get people to recognize Neir's, to be at Neir's, to even come once a year, right? Not every day, right? Everybody can't come every, but what people don't realize is that, you're trying to give this 2-for-1 and this and that, and we're trying to do all this regular stuff that businesses do. But Neir's is special. Why do we have to give a deal every time to get someone to walk through the door? Neir's is the deal. The fact that you have a 193-year-old place that's still operating, serving good burgers, which is top 10 in the New York State, by the way, and good food and just good ambiance and the quality, no fights, just really good place. And it has so much history. Where else are you going to go? Neir's Tavern itself is the deal. The fact that it exists is the deal of the century.
That is the attraction. Yeah.
It is, but there is this misalignment with our attention with everything else and people that are, just paying money to distract us from what's important. And only when it's gone or getting ready to go is when we realize what's important. And we saw that in January 2020, and I realized something. We had thousands of people that showed up. I mean, like just media and cameras, I'm like, what is going on? I was really dumbfounded. Like, where are these people coming from? But what we noticed was that, unfortunately, only when things are getting ready to be taken from us that we know within our soul is important, we start to act. And I'm no different, I've noticed that. But now the fact is, how do we consciously a little bit more be more aligned to that,
Yeah. Well, the same thing happened with the Queen's Link, and we'll get into that later. But, when the mayor announced the allocation for the park plan, now all of a sudden it's urgent. So, maybe you had thousands of people who said, yeah, we support the train, but what are they doing on a day-to-day basis? I mean, are they really advocating for it? But once it's threatened, once it looks like we're going to lose it, then you start to see people show up and say, hey, we better do something. That's just human nature. I mean, you do expect that. And I say, you look at that, like, you look at it like a silver lining, right? Like, yeah, it is. Our backs are to the wall right now, but at a time like this, you do see that you have a lot of support when you need the most. Yeah.
It's something that you only see when, unfortunately, things like this come about. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's important for all of us to just reevaluate where our priorities lie. Yeah. And things will work itself out.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know you got to go. Last question I wanted to ask you about was Anthony Bourdain, because I was a big fan of his show, Parts Unknown, and I loved him highlighting places all over the world and the food and the culture. When he did his Queens episode, he showed up to Neir's and interviewed you. So what was that experience like, and what did that do for Neir's?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you a story. I don't know if I've ever told a story about Anthony Bourdain and him interviewing me. So first of all, let me be honest, and I'm going to be very transparent with you. I really didn't know who Anthony Bourdain was. They're like, so I had, crazily, it was almost like, oh, it's another interview. I don't want to, but you were doing all these interviews in different places, just trying to get the word out of Neir's, Neir's being the biggest cheerleader for this place. And someone said, oh, yeah, they want to interview you this place. They do this show. Oh, yeah, cool. And I end up showing up, and there was this guy outside with his back turned. And so I kind of like walked by him, and I was like, oh, I guess that's the host, And I don't know, he didn't say anything. It was almost like he was ignoring me. And I'm like, wow, this is very different. Normally these hosts is like, hey, how you doing? What's your name again? How'd you get involved? And do all this chit chat until you get ready to be on camera. So finally the crew put me down and sat me here. They set everything up. And I'm like, where's this guy? And finally, the guy comes in, he sits down, he started introducing himself. I'm introducing myself, and I'm talking, and we're chatting, blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking in the back of my head, why was this guy ignoring me? And then I came to realize the staff and the crew just said, okay, Mr. Bourdain, cut, we got everything. I'm like, got everything? We didn't even start yet. And I realized something. He was so authentic. He wanted everything to be on camera. The first meeting, the first conversation, the first story, everything he wanted to experience right there on camera, not do any pre-interview or anything. He wanted to be truly authentic. And I started looking around, and I realized a lot of his show is just off the cuff, being very genuine, very true, just very, just authentic. Nothing is manufactured. That's where, and so I found out that this guy is the real deal. And then I found out he has millions and millions of followers. Like, oh, shoot. And next thing you know, it's on CNN and all this stuff like that. But that's the story with Anthony Bourdain. Wow. He really was a special one. And I'm fortunate that he chose Neir's Tavern to highlight in his show. Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it, that Queens episode is one of my favorites. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's Queens. It's great spot stuff that he chooses to highlight, including Neir's.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Well, we thank you, Loy, for joining us. That was a terrific interview. You really went into depth about Neir's, its history, your involvement, and what it means to the community. And I guess before you go, why don't you let people know where Neir's is if they don't know, and how they may follow. You mentioned on social media, hit those notifications, but where can people find you on social media, and how can they stay up with what's going on at Neir's?
Yeah, so again, my name is Loycent Gordon, the owner of historic Neir's Tavern. They call it the most famous bar you've never heard of. Goodfellas was filmed there, Mae West, Anthony Bourdain as well, and so many others that was filmed there. But Neir's Tavern can be found on most of the social media platform. Go to neirstavern.com. You can book a reservation, of course. Also, I want to thank Queen's Chamber, who has made me a business person of the year for 2022. I really want to thank people that has always supported Neir's Tavern and the mission that I've had. And I can always say, Neir's for years on this road to 200. I really do believe if we come together and work together purposefully, that community can conquer all. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, that actually sounds like the bottom line, Jay.
It does sound it like, and for, if you're not aware, Lloyd, we do a thing here at the end of the show. We give the guests the bottom line to kind of sum up anything that they want people to take away with. And what you just said there sounds perfect.
Neir's for years. Yes.
Neir's for years. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Loy, for joining us. Everyone, please support Neir's. We have to support these places, or we're not going to have them. We're going to look back and thinking, man, I wish we still had Neir's. Wish we still had this. So while we have it, let's do all we can to keep it.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. And again, community conquers all. Believe it.
Yes.
And yes, thank you for having me, Mike and Jay. Jalen.
Jaylon.
We just had the name thing. Jalen. I'm sorry, Jaylon.
Oh, boy.
All right. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
All right.
Yeah.
Loycent. I don't even know how you would mispronounce his name.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's pronounced the way it's written, Loycent. So
yeah. I mean, you'd have a hard time trying to mispronounce it, I think. Loycent wouldn't even sound right.
Yeah. Oh man, you have to take a dig at me. That's okay.
Yeah, he caught you with that one.
Yeah.
Jalen.
So
Deborah in the chat.
Good information.
Yeah, Deborah in the chat says, I'm a once in a while only because I can't afford to eat out that much with my two kids, but I'm always suggesting Neir's and saying that we need to come again and again. We love Neir's. Yeah. Neir's.
Yeah, I mean,
Karen in the chat.
Neir's is our family. Yeah. It's especially these days with the economics and whatnot, it can be difficult for people to get out and eat often. But it's I guess when you do go out and when you have that opportunity to do that, I guess you would think maybe put a local establishment before a chain if you're going to go out and spend that time and money, or just more often than not, go to a local establishment if possible instead of a chain. And
you know what? It doesn't have to be a full meal. I mean, it's a bar. You can stop for a beer, get a drink. If you're meeting a friend, say, hey, why don't we stop off at Neir's? Even, maybe you're going to go out later or do something else later, but why don't we stop off at Neir's for a drink beforehand or whatever?
Right. So, yeah. That's what's up.
Loy mentioned all the press coverage he got, especially when the bar was being threatened with closure. And I think that's a great segue into what we've experienced with the Queen's Link. And I have to mention, this movement that we're seeing really now started on this particular podcast in many ways, because we put out that poll, if you recall, Jay, asking if people thought we should give up on the Queen's Link or keep fighting. And 100% said, keep fighting. Right? Everyone who answered the poll said, keep fighting, because the mayor did announce $35 million for phase one of the Queen's Way, which to some would spell doom.
Yeah.
But the people wanted us to keep fighting. And so we did. And we did the rally in Rockaway, which was a great success. We got coverage from New York One, where we talked about everything going on inside City Hall. We had all the local papers come out and cover it. Well, now we have the New York Times. And I really want to shout out the reporter, who I think did a great job with the story. So yeah, this was Sunday's New York Times. You can see the cover here. And the Sunday edition is the hefty one. It's the one that gets the most readership. Here's the Metropolitan section. And you can see, if you just turn to Metropolitan section, it's right here. And the headline is Dueling Dreams for a Derelict Rail Line. Almost sounds like a rap bar. But
Yeah, right.
the subheadline says, what does Queens need more, a nature trail or expanded transit options? And the story is by Winnie who interviewed me for it. And it took a picture. It's actually dramatic. I put this on my Instagram. The photographer, let's see if you can see this. There's the picture. The photographer told me to look stern because I guess I was smiling initially in the picture.
That's odd.
Well, because he wanted to make it look dramatic because it's a serious issue. And he was like, you're standing behind the tracks or in front of the tracks, I guess, look more stern. And so he took that shot. It's funny because the shot of the Queens Way folks, the people who want to turn this into a park, they're all smiling. So I don't know if that was done intentionally. Like they should all smile because they're almost taking a victory lap with this money they got from the mayor, and we're looking more angry because we're trying to fight back. I don't know if that was, but that was his thing, right? Look more stern. So I did. And the story came out. I mentioned going to Puerto Rico for Somos El Futuro, the conference a couple of weeks back. When I got off the plane, actually, I landed in Puerto Rico and I checked my phone. The reporter had called me to ask about the story. She wanted to get more from me. And really what she wanted to do was make sure I was okay with what she was going to write about me in the New York Times. And I found that interesting. But to be honest with you, the same thing happened last year with a different reporter from the New York Times. When they interviewed me about the city council district, he also called me to ask if I was okay with what he was going to write. And I was wondering if that was something that the Times always did. Are they doing that because I'm a lawyer? They're afraid I might sue for defamation. Like, why is it that they want to make sure I clear the language? And in fact, last year it became a whole thing where I went back and forth with this reporter for a couple of weeks because he kept calling me to ask for more information about the district, because there's a whole story he was doing about the council district, about the history of it, different candidates from all back years and different dynamics. And he told me that I was the most helpful person he talked to for his story about the district. So he kept asking me, but then he kept asking me if what he was saying was accurate and if he should write it this way. And then when it got to my part, he was asking me if I was okay with my part. And it got to a point where I eventually told him what I thought he should say. Like if something was wrong, I corrected it. But then he kept asking for my opinion more and more, to the point where I felt more emboldened, I guess, to say, hey, maybe you should write it like this. And then it got, I think, almost maybe too far, because he was like, hey, wait a minute, I'm the reporter here. I was like, all right, but you're asking me so many times for like weeks now how the story should be written. So I always found that kind of back and forth interesting. But what ended up happening with that story, and really why I was pushing back at all last year, was because they were trying to present this story as a civil war in our council district. And this is how it was laid out to me. It was the north of the district was progressive people of color. The south of the district were white conservatives. And it was like this clash in District 32. And I said, it's not that black and white, like no pun intended, but it's not. That's not how this is. And I said, and you actually are really causing a problem. You can actually cause danger by portraying our district this way. I mean, it might be fun for the sake of the story, but to the people who live here, that's going to be a problem. And, for us, do we want to have a story coming out basically saying we're at war with our neighbors? That was nuts to me. And so I actually sent the Times reporter at the time election data from our district showing it's not what you think it is. Like, yes, there's some of that, especially in primaries. You see some of that play out. There is division, and I've been the first to call out that division, and people even criticize me for acknowledging that there is that division. No, there is. We have to recognize that reality if we want to overcome it. But it also shouldn't be presented as this war where it's like a monolith here and a monolith there, and here comes the clash, because it isn't quite that dramatic. It's much more nuanced than that. Real life is more nuanced than these black and white depictions that they want to make. But this is when the reporter admitted to me that the Times is not a New York paper. It's a worldwide publication. And so people are reading this all over the place. When I used to work in Virginia, they got the New York Times delivered to the office in Virginia every morning.
Yeah.
New York Times. So this is just a New York local paper. This isn't the Wave, the Rockaway Times, or the Queens Chronicle. They're writing, this is what the guy told me. He actually used Kansas as an example. We're writing these stories to appeal to people in Kansas. So they want the sensationalism. And that wasn't even coming from the reporter. That was coming from the editors, people above him. He was just kind of doing his job and trying to write it in a way that's going to satisfy them. So I think we pushed back on that last year, and I think it did help. Now, the story did still come out in that sensational way, and I would push back still on how it came out a little bit. But I think the fact that we were able to give him that proper context did help the story, because it was going to be, I think, a much more dramatic story than it ended up being. Now, similar, I would say, happened, you could argue, here with this Queenslink story, because the response that I got from people, I think it was a great story. I think Winnie did a great job with it. But there were people who said that it seemed to favor the park plan a little bit more. If you really start reading into it, I mean, even starting with the headline, Dueling Dreams for a Derelict Rail Line, what does Queens need more, a nature trail or expanded transit? So immediately they're presenting it as either or, this versus this, right? The Queenslink plan is really a compromise. We're saying we want transportation first and foremost, and we don't want the park plan to jeopardize that asset as a transit right of way. But we're fine with using the additional land for park space, as long as this is designed in a deliberate way. We're not anti-park. We're saying we can have both. There's plenty of land here to have both. That is mentioned in the story, but that's not really the overall spin or the narrative I think put on. Because again, not a knock on the reporter. That's just how the Times is. That's how these big media outlets are. They want to present it as this versus that. Here comes the clash. Here comes the fight. It's that sensational coverage that they're trying to give it, to make it appeal to someone in a different place, right? Because in New York, local to Queens, you might understand the nuances more. You might be like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that train line and I know about it. I know there's plenty of space here and you could do both. You could compromise. You could have this. You know, to someone else, they may not understand that or want to understand that. They want to make it more digestible to them. And it's a fancier, sexier, more exciting story, I guess, to be like, there's one group fighting for the train, one group fighting for the park. Here comes the showdown on the tracks. Right. That's the story that they would like to tell. And so there was pushback even internally amongst the Queenslink group. I'm in a group chat with the Queenslink folks, and they're talking about that as well. Should we send corrections or try to get them to issue a retraction of any kind? I don't really think that that's necessary, because I do think the article overall was good. But I just think if you start reading into it, you start looking at these spins they're trying to put on it. I mean, even with the idea that if you read the beginning, it talks about the Queen's Way and, someone's dream to convert this line into a park. And then at the end, it concludes with that story. Basically, it wraps up the beginning, which is, kind of a literary technique where you kind of end on the same note that you began. But the train stuff is kind of shoehorned in the middle. And so to someone reading it, they might come off with the impression that they favor the park, because that's how they began the story and how they ended the story. People tend to remember the beginning and the ends more than the middle. So,
right. It sounds like it was, overall it was good and a helpful piece.
Yeah. I would like to call, we never did this before. Should we try calling Rick Horan to see if he'll give us kind of his brief thoughts on it? Because he did have things to say on it. I don't know if he's even going to answer if we call
him. You might want to, before doing that, let him know that he'd be
well, if he answers, we'll tell him. We'll tell him before saying anything else. I mean, just to give him that courtesy. I'm sure he'll be fine with it.
Right. But I mean, that's a good look. I mean, just, the fight is being brought to a wider audience. And even if they're writing for, like you said, Middle America, there's still a significant readership in New York that will be made aware of what's going on in this fight. So that can bring more interest and maybe more help, more people come out for it or support.
No, absolutely. And and I think the headline and the article kind of speaks for itself. I mean, it's asking people, what does Queens need more, a nature trail or expanded transit options? I really believe most people reading that are going to say transit options, right? Especially when you look at where this park is. It's really a park through a park. We make the joke, it sounds like those exhibit memes. We built a park through your park so you can park while you park. But that's really what this is. And again, we're not against the park space, but don't do it at the expense of transportation. I mean, we're so stifled as a borough and as a city because of this lack of proper transit. And I do want to mention also that we did have a lot of success coming off of this. The Queenslink website saw a tremendous spike in visitors. In fact, the top 2 days in the site's history were the day that this article came out online, topped only by the following day where it came out in print. And we're talking literally thousands of people Googling or searching for Queenslink and going to the site. Thousands of people did that after this article came out. So think about how many people must have read it for thousands of people to actually search the site and go to the site. That's wild.
Absolutely.
So
it's a good thing. Sounds like it's great. And they got their. What I find funny is that the reporter had to tell you not to smile, which is weird because you don't smile that much anyway.
That's right. There was somebody I should smile.
Yeah, and then now you smile and they're like, no, don't smile.
Yeah. In the New York Times of all places, right?
Yeah.
I was destined to not be seen on camera smiling, I guess. What can I say?
Well, yeah. So that's funny. Wasn't there? I thought there was a rap album or a mixtape or something called "No Smiling" or something.
Really?
I don't know. There's something about that. So very interesting. Now you did want to bring up also.
See if I can't see the phone.
Oh, got the phone ringing right now. So we had an exclusive.
Hey Rick, what's going on?
How you doing?
Good. So I'm actually doing the podcast right now. I hope you don't mind. You are live on Nuance, but I wanted to get your thoughts really quickly on the New York Times article, and if you thought that there was a slant or, if it was fairly presented.
Oh, good question. At some point, I'd like to speak to Winnie Yu, the author, and ask her how the story initiated. Somebody had actually given me her name a few months ago, and I should have called her to take the initiative because I think maybe it might have been a, much different angle on it. But, it's, I think she just skimmed the surface. She kind of just, I think told, a story of, what it appears to be. But I think the real story is, under the surface, and that's the, the political, part of it that led to the decision to get started with parks and really give transit the short shift.
Right. Yeah, and I was just mentioning the fact that the story begins talking about the park plan and it ends that way. I think makes some people come off with the impression that it favors the park plan. But I think on balance, it was fair and it presented both sides. And I think the reader is left to make their own decisions and determinations. And I really think that most people reading that are going to say, hey, wait a minute, Queens does need more transit. Like, you could have both, but what are you doing trying to take it away?
Well, yeah, good point. And, I was curious, she's actually on my list. The author is on my list of people to call this week. I'd like to ask her, why they used different headlines for the print and online version. I think the print one was something like differing.
I have it right here.
For
Dueling Dreams for a Derelict Rail Line. Yep.
Yeah, and then I thought the better headline, of course, from our perspective is, what does Queens need more, parks or transit or something like
well,
that.
that's the sub headline. So if you have the print edition under that Dueling Dreams headline, you see that other headline in smaller print.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen the hard copy yet, so that's good. I'm glad at least it's a sub. I think it helps, just let people know that this is still an issue. This is not decided by any means. And hopefully it's the first of many articles. I'd certainly like the Times to revisit this,
right.
But from the different angle, that I had mentioned relative to, what's the political process that should support, how Queens does, make this decision. It shouldn't be done by the mayor and, in a back room with, a small group of special interests. We're hoping, we think that obviously the more conversation, the more people that are engaged in this decision, the better decision will result. And I think it's probably going to be a full year, before this thing plays itself out. The MTA study is supposed to be done by then.
Right.
Maybe we'll get a chance to, maybe get an economic study done in the meantime. But the more data that people have, I think the smarter decision will be made.
I agree. So we'll follow up on that. Hopefully we'll get more in the Times. Hey, listen, we started off with the local papers. We got New York One, we got New York Times. Let's get to Good Morning America next. Let's take this thing nationwide.
Yeah, no, you're right. And we just have to find, I think, maybe the right writer or the right publication, that's interested in digging a little bit, because, I think that's where the gold is, to, really go under the surface and make sure that, we're handling important decisions like this in a way, that, we can be proud of in the future. I don't think anyone wants to, look back on this as a missed opportunity. And so, I think, it's a good start. This resolution that the city council just passed, I think sends a good message as well to the mayor that, transit is important, and an EIS for Queenslink, would be money well spent at this stage.
Yes. Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. We'll talk soon.
Well, okay, Mike, thanks for the call.
All right.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, there you have it. The fight continues.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that. We had an exclusive from the News Cafe owner, and then we had our first phone call.
Yeah, you see that on podcasts all the time, right? They just kind of guerrilla force it, like we're just going to call such and such, see if they answer. But there's some excitement to that.
Sure. So I think, and that's good. It's good to get that reaction.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, there you go with the Queenslink, guys. We got to keep up the fight, and I like that common thread between Neir's and the Queenslink, even, right? Like you see when the back is to the wall, people start coming out and showing up. I mean, it would be nice if people were there all the time, but people are busy, right? It means, we only have so much time in a day, and so much money, so many resources to go around. But you do see where people's values lie when they're forced to make a decision like this.
Right. And I know we are coming up on time here, and I know you wanted to mention something that was kind of breaking news, and then get more into it possibly next week. And then the poll question. Yeah.
So why don't we reveal the poll results briefly from last week's poll, which was about voter ID. And the reason why we asked this was because someone requested that we make it a poll. And so we accommodated their request to ask what people thought about this idea of whether voter ID would improve election integrity. And perhaps not surprisingly, it was a very contentious issue. Again, maybe perhaps not surprisingly, because we're seeing a trend here on Facebook. You saw people say yes more than on Instagram. In fact, on Facebook, it tilted more to the yes in terms of the voter ID, whereas on Instagram, it tilted more towards the no. But when you put them together, you average out the Facebook and the Instagram, it came to 53% no, 47% yes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually, it's interesting that it was leaning more towards the yes on Instagram.
No, Facebook. Which has been the pattern that we've seen. Facebook tends to be a little bit more conservative on average than Instagram.
Right. Yeah, and the demographic is usually older on Facebook than Instagram.
Exactly right.
Now we did get a response on a comment to it on our Instagram, and they were just saying that what we had echoed in the discussion, that in spite of the lies certain politicians tell, that election fraud isn't a problem in the U.S., and that these voter ID laws are basically looking for solutions to non-existent issues, and the real intent is voter suppression.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. As we mentioned last time, voting is a fundamental right. And so if you're going to make it harder to vote, you have to have a compelling reason, and you have to do so in the least restrictive way possible. And so let's start off with this idea that there's no evidence out there that there is widespread voter fraud. such that you would need to suppress the right to vote this way.
Right. Absolutely.
But moving on to the next topic, you mentioned this breaking news. And in fact, I was just reading about it before we went live. So we can probably have a more detailed discussion on this next week. But the idea here is that the mayor is announcing an initiative to give involuntary treatment to people suffering from mental illnesses. Now, this is really done in response to the violence and the incidents that we're seeing on the subway. And there's something called Kendra's Law here. But the gist of it has been, we've always kind of thought of the standard when it comes to either admitting someone involuntarily or giving them involuntary treatment. The idea is, are they posing a threat, an imminent danger to themselves or others? And if so, then action can be taken kind of as an emergency response to get that under control. Well, apparently they're looking to expand that now. And the mayor is saying that someone can be given what they're calling compassionate care, whether or not they pose an imminent threat to themselves or others, just if they are suffering from severe mental illness and they think that it's needed. And so it looks like what they're trying to do basically is take people to the hospital from the subway, from places in public where, you know, there's a concern, I guess, that it could become problematic. Again, they're saying that they're going to do so even if they don't believe that it's imminent. So someone might not be about to cause trouble, but they may think that because their condition is severe enough, it could become an issue if not treated. So this raises questions about basically who judges this. How is this determined? You're saying it's not imminent. Okay, so what is the standard? And is there no standard anymore? I mean, you know, we need to be mindful of people's liberties here as well. With that said, we do need to address the issue, right? And so I commend the mayor for trying to do something, and the governor also trying to do something on this, but we need to be careful about what we're doing and making sure we're doing it in a way that respects people's rights.
Absolutely. It is kind of scary if they can just come and just take someone and put them away for their own, purpose. And I think it sounds a little similar to Florida has what's called the Baker Act. And basically someone can, call it Baker. They use it as a verb a lot of times as well. Have someone submitted for psychiatric or mental evaluation, and they can be held for like 72 hours for that evaluation. And, a family member can do it. Someone, if you're acting erratic or there's some kind of thing, there's that process in place for it, but they can only hold you for 72 hours. Here, I guess we don't have enough information yet to see how that process works, if it's an indefinite thing or it's just at their determination. Okay, well, you pose, or you have this issue, not necessarily that you pose a risk, but you have this issue, so we're going to give you involuntary treatment. And then also, that does scare me. What does that mean? Does that mean medications? Does that mean forced medications? Does that mean you can't leave the facility? Does that, that's... No,
when I was in law school, I was assigned to go to Bellevue at one point to monitor these hearings that were going on at Bellevue. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me, because you would see patients at Bellevue who were there against their will. They were being forcibly held in Bellevue, and they were testifying, and sometimes they had lawyers, sometimes they didn't, but they were testifying at these hearings before this judge.
Say it one more time? It kind of broke
Sometimes they had lawyers, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they were just arguing their own case before this judge at Bellevue. This happened in the hospital, in a special courtroom they had set up in the hospital. They would say that they should be let go. They were fine, whatever. Their issue was under control. They had the situation sorted out. Oftentimes they were trying to say they had a job lined up, or remember this one guy saying his uncle owned a barbershop in Atlanta, I think, and he was going to go down there and work in the barbershop. And that judge said, that doesn't sound concrete enough. You're saying that you might go to Atlanta and work in a barbershop. I want to have something more serious than that. I want to have like a letter or something. Like they really had this high standard. To me, just as a law student watching it, it felt like a very high bar that they were asked to get over to get their release. And I felt bad because, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just my nature, but I kind of think that's human nature. You're sitting there watching these people plead for their freedom and having judges time and time again say, no, you got to go back in. Again, these weren't people convicted of a crime, but they were deemed to pose imminent harm to themselves or to others. Now we're saying this can go even beyond that, and it could be done to people who don't necessarily pose imminent harm. But I would hope it would at least be harm, right? I mean, I hope you wouldn't do it to someone unless you thought they were going to be a danger to society or to somebody.
It can't just be thought. Like, there has to be some kind of concrete proof that this is going to be. Otherwise, you're just basically abducting people, and that doesn't really sit right with me.
There needs to be a standard, and there needs to be a check on it. And, you know, I think there should be lawyers. I mean, there should be some due process involved. Now, obviously, if someone is acting up on the subway, you're not going to bring in lawyers and a judge to the subway and have a whole trial or a hearing there. Sometimes you need to act, but there still needs to be a standard and a check on that and a level of review, I think. And I don't think you should have just unfettered authority to do it, because then you can easily trample people's rights.
Right. So I think, we'll look more into this to see, it's new news. So I guess there hasn't been a lot of reporting on it. So there's probably lacking some details to the plan that could bring some of that into focus, or maybe, allay some of the fears, or, create new ones. Who knows?
Yeah. So this is just kind of the first blush, but why don't we put the poll question out on that general subject, and then next week we can go into a little bit more detail on it.
Right.
So the poll question for the week is, do you believe that authorities should be able to involuntarily hospitalize and treat someone who's mentally ill, even if they don't pose imminent danger to themselves or others?
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I look forward to hearing what the responses will be on that. So it's kind of a little scary. Yeah,
I mean, I think for me, no pun intended, my bottom line on this is the line has to be drawn somewhere. And we have to figure out where that line is. But there has to be a standard, and it has to be constitutional.
Right. Yeah. So, but very, very something to think about. And I think we had a very interesting discussion this week. And also for those who want to add more comments, you can do that on YouTube, and definitely subscribe there. Hit us up on there. Hit us up on Instagram. Both are Nuance Show. And when you see the polls, respond to the polls.
Oh, yeah. And I wanted to mention this also. Actually vote yes or no if you want it to register as a yes or no, because I'm getting that now too. I'll get thumbs up on the story. And that doesn't tell me, maybe they're intending to vote yes, but I don't know that. They could have liked the turkey hat. They could have liked whatever, the video, I mean, the question itself. I don't know if that's a yes or a no. So for me to count it as such, please select yes or no.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we get that on YouTube a lot. It's the thumbs up or the thumbs down button. It's like, that doesn't, is that how you're voting, or you hate the question? Do you not like what I'm wearing? Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. This has been Nuance, and what's your new name? Jalen, right? He went there. He called you Jalen. Is that going to stick?
Jalen. Go again.
No. Jalen Carter. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.